Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. People. My name is Rizki Perdana Sucipto, and I'm going to explain to you about the history of psycholinguistics. As you can see in my left, it's a mind map of the history of psycholinguistics. It all began in the ancient Egyptians to the Greek philosophers. The text stresses the early examination of language and the brain. With ancient Egyptians, nothing had injuries and potential cases of aphasia. Plato and Aristotle had differing views on the brain's role. Plato's work on language and word meaning, like the allegory of the cave, influenced the philosophy of language. Next, we go to the earliest empirical studies, the prehistory of psycholinguistics up until the 19th century, like systematic and ongoing inquiry into the relationships between mind, language, and brain. While some experiments were conducted, they were rare and often ethically questionable. Notably, several experiments from as early as the 7th century BC to the 16th century AD involve isolating babies to determine what language they will speak. Next, we are talking to the 19th century, or the emergence of the cognitive neuropsychology of language. In the 19th century, the roots of psycholinguistics were established through systematic studies on the brain-language relationships. Key figures like Gall, Bulliard, Obertin, Broca, Wernicke, and Lichtenstein contributed to this early investigation. Now we leap to the early 20th century, or we can call the influence of behaviorism. By the late 19th century, language study transitions from breakdown analysis to examining its normal use. Psychologists like Wilhelm Wundt and William James introduced the role of mental states in language. However, in the early 20th century, witnessed a conflict between behaviorism, which focused on behavior, and linguistic taxonomy. Now we jump to the mid-20th century and the Chomskyan influence. In 1959, Chomsky challenged Skinner's behaviorist view on language by emphasizing mental structures in linguistic theories. He introduced the distinction between competence, or knowledge about language, and performance, or language use. Chomsky proposed innate mechanisms for learning language structures, although this idea faced opposition. His influence on psycholinguistics was significant; however, it is worth noting that despite Chomsky's work, a journal established in 1962 was named "Journal of Verbal Learning and Verbal Behavior", aligning with the behaviorist tradition, reflecting the ongoing diversity in approaches within the field. Next, the late 20th century: emergence of connectionism, statistical approaches to language. In 1986, the parallel distributed processing book marked a turning point for connectionism in psycholinguistics. It emphasized neural networks and encoding of knowledge through connectivity patterns, allowing for learning based on simple associative principles. Models like trace and elements had a significant impact on spoken word recognition and language dependencies, developing internal representation resembling grammatical knowledge. However, connectionism faced criticism for reducing language to statistics and challenging traditional linguistic views. A debate emerged between rule-based and statistical word formation. Statistical approaches became more popular, applying across various language domains. Despite some criticism, Connectionism shaped psycholinguistics, sparking a division between connectionists and symbolists in the field in the 21st century. Interest grew in grounding language and cognition in action. The last one, but not least, the early 21st century and the grounding of language in action and the brain. Traditional cognition suggests that perception provides representation for mental reconstruction, while embodied cognition argues that cognition and action share the same representational medium rooted in sensory motoric representations and neural substrates. This perspective has gained support from neuroimaging and eye movement studies, showing that language comprehension is grounded in sensory motoric representation. Concepts are distributed across various brain regions, with words related to tool use activating motoric areas. Studies tracking language-mediated eye movements and motoric responses to linguistic stimuli further support this perspective, aligning with early ideas in psycholinguistics and converging with neuroimaging findings. Well, I think that is all from me from the mind map that I have made for this final, sorry, I mean mid mid test exam of psycholinguistics. I'm sorry for the mistakes and thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.